All right. So what I thought after the game was accurate. We played pretty good football. They made some plays down the stretch and made some better calls than we did as coaches. But overall, played a pretty good game. Need to rush the ball a little better, and then need to defend. Well, a couple times we dropped coverage and gave them big plays. But when I watched the tape, overall, I felt much better. If there's any way to feel better after you come up short with the way our guys played. So, on to Texas, and guys were back last night and had good meetings, good practice, and so as the world turns in college football, we're back at it.
Were you able to diagnose kind of what went wrong offensively there towards the end of the game?
We just couldn't rush the ball effectively. It became one-dimensional. So you come one-dimensional, much more easier to defend.
What was going wrong with the running game?
We just weren't very physical, and we just couldn't get into a rhythm rushing the ball. We just got to keep doing the same stuff we're doing and improve.
Go ahead.
Do you anticipate Spencer practicing this week?
Let's do ourselves a favor. Y'all don't ask me about injuries, and we won't have any problems. I'm not going to tell you about injuries. I'm not going to tell you who practices and doesn't. You wouldn't reveal your hand either. It's nothing personal, but I'm not going to talk about who practices and who doesn't practice just because it's not fair and it's not smart on my part.
Mike, I understand it's not smart, but ABC before the game or during the game said you told them you didn't practice, and then after the game you said I'm not going to talk about it. So I don't know why
What happened is Molly came and got me right before kickoff, and she said, "We know that Spencer did not practice. We know this. We know that." About 7 other things, and what I should have told her was that those aren't things that I discussed, and I will in the future. In fact, we should probably put that out from our own department, and that way we don't have that issue. But the players don't like it. They don't like people knowing they practice, don't practice. You have some guys that have potential NFL. They don't want, even though they might know, they might not know. They don't really like it either. And it's not smart to show our hand. That was a mistake on my part now that you bring it up, but it was different because it was 20 minutes before kickoff versus talking about it during the week. But really, I should have said the same thing to her I do the local press to say, hey, those aren't things I talk about. That way it's fair to everybody. I would say that's probably a good point.
Mike, let me ask you this. Quarterback has a shoulder issue. You don't want to go deep into what's wrong with him specifically, but I would assume that's a little bit more worrisome for a head coach when he's got a quarterback dealing with an ankle tweak, or it's different than if it's below the waist and not in his throwing arm.
It just depends on what it is. And it can be a variety of things. It can be a non-throwing shoulder. And so we just have to weigh our options based on where we're at and what it is, and then go on down the road. Any type of injury is a concern for a player that we have that we want to play on Saturday that can't practice as much during the week. But it's not something that we haven't ever dealt with. I mean, we deal with this all the time. That's just the way it is. Sometimes guys can't make it back for the game. Other guys have to play. Sometimes they can make it back.
Let me ask you this. Is it a bigger deal because his importance on this year's team is more central than it might have been even last year when you had a defense that you could adjust to, right, offensively, because you knew that they were going to hold the opponent down week to week? Does that create more?
Well, I think anytime you play with the defense we did last year, you have a little bit more. You have more options. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Which you saw last year. I mean, we could just kind of run the ball and use the clock, and then figure we could win 17-16 last year. Well, we're fairly young on defense this year, so we don't have that option. But anytime you lose you or potentially could lose a starting quarterback, it's an issue. Make a difference what it is. But last year's defense did give us other options.
At this time of year, when you get to this point, you mentioned running the football, and I know you just said we need to keep doing the same things we're doing and do it better. Are there options? Are there some things you can play around with and plug in, maybe personnel or scheme, where you think you can maybe jack it up a little?
I don't believe in that. I don't think you can trick a team. I don't think you can change what you do Tuesday and Wednesday and go out and play well and say this is going to work. That's me. I don't think that players are capable of absorbing and understanding concepts and schemes with the multiple defenses that we see nowadays. Years and years ago, but I mean, I use the term with my staff. If we have a guy go down, we've got to replace that guy. And travel baseball is a great example. 12-year-old travel baseball. If the shortstop gets hurt, and we take the third baseman and move him to shortstop, and the left fielder and move him to third, and the right fielder and move him to left, and the center fielder to right, we've moved 6 people to replace one guy. That's not what I believe in. So if we have somebody go down, somebody else needs to replace them. We need to stay in our system. I think we have the best chance of having success versus trying something new and trying to trick the next team, because I just don't think that works. I just don't think you'll be any good at it. That's my opinion.
I'm not saying that Richardson isn't the guy or anything.
Mhm.
I thought he did a lot of great things on Saturday.
Sure. He
But
ran good. He ran good, yeah.
You put Nixon in, and in the I think it's late third quarter, he had a couple of decent runs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, because you've always been a multi-bat guy, do you think about maybe including the other bats?
He's coming along. There's a physicality to this game that is different with him than 23, period. Those are violent hits those guys take. And so, not that we have all the answers, I'm just giving you what we believe in. I went home last night and watched the fourth quarter of the Cowboys game, and they have one guy that's really good. He makes a lot of money, and he doesn't run the ball any more than number 20 does. And the reason why is because the violent hits they take at that level. And eventually, if you just keep running them, they're going to get knocked out. Now, Dom is more mature than any running back that we have on our team, period. If 23 had another year under his belt, he would share more of the load right now. And we're going to get him more carries as we move forward to protect 20. 20 ran hard. 20 got us yards at times we didn't have yards. We need to front guys up better. We need to move our feet, cover guys up. He needs to continue to run the way he runs. And then we need to get those other guys in some as they mature. Ollie's got some talent, can do some things, but it's a different game right now for him.
His play, it was actually a smart play on his part. Agreed.
What's that?
The one where
Yes.
he tucked the ball and just got what he could get.
Yeah, but just he's still a young player, he's a freshman, and we're playing against teams now that can hit. They'll hit you hard and they'll tackle you. They're physical, just like this team we're going to play.
Looking at, when you look back at last year's offensive line, you seemed like you guys were probably more comfortable running the ball, and pass protection was a little bit shaky at times. It seems like it's kind of flipped this year, even though you got a lot of the same guys involved. Is that just?
The guy that's
I know you
playing
lost
for the
some-
Steelers now made that look different. I mean, it's just a fact. Dom is doing great, but we had a 4th or 5th year kid that's now playing for the Steelers. So, Lincoln Riley's a great friend of mine. I think he's a good football coach. But Kyler Murray and number 6 and the guy that played for the Eagles make you look really good. It's just the way it is. It's the old Eddie Sutton deal. I want to go to the Kentucky Derby. I want a full-blood thoroughbred. I'm not really in for a mule. So our guys are Dom ran good. Dom ran powerful. We need to front guys up better, and then when he gets in space, he'll make some guys miss and such. And then we're going to have to share some of the load because he's getting a lot of hits and taking a lot of blows. So we'll eventually have to do that.
Were you excited what you saw with him in the passing game and the screen game? Because that's
Yeah, he's good. Does good. See, when he's catching the screens and he's out in space and he's running and doing good. So if you envision him getting in space, looks pretty good. We got to get him in space more. We got to get him out there a little more. And the difference, and Dom knows this. We've had this. The difference between him and Warren is Warren was mature enough to create his own space. Remember how many times last year that it didn't look real good, and then he got out and created. He turned a 3-yard into not a 6, but a 16-yard run. Did that 3 or 4 times a game. Now I got an extra 50 yards rushing. If you watched him on tape at Utah State, that wasn't there early in his career. But as he matured and got better and changed and developed, and he gave us some of that last year.
What did you see that TCU did to Bryson, to number 9? I mean, I went back and tried to look. 'Cause
Well, they play. You know, they've got some carryover there with what they've done with Coach Patterson there. I mean, those guys were pretty good at what they do on defense, and the guy that went from Tulsa to there is a good football coach, and they do a good job playing defense. I mean, they're still pretty good on defense, and they're playing with some new guys in the box. It's a little different for them this year, but out there on the perimeter, they're playing pretty good.
speaking of Coach P, Gary Patterson, in watching Texas already, you can see his influence on that.
Sure, he's very involved. I mean, I'm not in their meetings. I don't know any of them. I just know that it looks that way to me.
And when you were talking about the defensive backs just now from TCU, John Paul Richardson mentioned they might have played a little bit more man than other teams have. How do you feel the receivers kind of responded to the man coverage from TCU?
We played okay. You know, man is, you know, obviously you have to be able to defeat, but I'm going to go back to if you can play man and be one-dimensional defensively, knowing that if you feel like you can hold up against the run and man and safeties can kind of cheat and help man, it's a different way of playing man. So instead of just saying I have you and there's no help behind me, that's a whole different cat. And so they played some of that against us when they didn't feel like we could rush the ball very well and kind of made us one-dimensional.
Hey, Coach. So going back to what you said about the running game, I know you said that you don't feel like Ali and those guys are there. So you feel like they're not super mature yet. At what point are you comfortable with giving them more experience in the game?
Well, as I said, we're going to start working those guys in. Nixon is showing physicality, and he's playing on punt, and he's playing on kickoff return. And when he was playing in the game, he did just fine. So as he evolves, he's earned a right to get more carries. But I want to say that it's not necessarily that we need to take him from Dom. Dom's running good for us, but I'm concerned about his total carries. And then Ollie gets better every day, but he's still a freshman. And freshmen, you have to be real careful of them at that particular position. See, they got the guy that's playing number 5, I think is his number, a good player they have down there at running back. And if you look at some of him early in his career, he's a whole different guy now than he was when he's a freshman. It's just maturity. I mean, he's a first-round pick now.
What kind of challenges hit not just him, but the Texas run game? You coming off a week
Yeah,
where you
so
probably didn't-
5's a good player. The other back they put in there is a good player. You know, the quarterback obviously flips it around pretty good. 8 is dynamic. You know, 8 is a threat wherever he is, whenever. Catching it, running it, throwing it, he can do a lot of things. 0 is a unique player for him. 0 is a hybrid tight end. They use him in the blocking game some, but he runs and plays like a wideout. So they use him doing some different things. He's a good player. You know, the left tackle they have, the one that we had committed here for a long time, is, you know, he's going to be for good news. He won't be about 3 years. He'll be gone. But he's a good player. So they look kind of like what they have. I mean, they're always going to have a couple wideouts that can burn 4-4 and run it. They've always had 5-star running backs. This quarterback throws it around pretty good.
Mike, one thing about Ewers, he doesn't seem to run as much as what we've seen. Dugan, you had to account for that at all times.
Yeah.
What does that do to your defensive game plan? When you
Makes it a little easier for us from that standpoint. Obviously, you got to be aware of most of the quarterbacks in this league take off and run on you. We did a good job with this quarterback Saturday. I thought we did a really good job. Hard to do because you're a half man short. They're protecting him. They're using a lot of slide protection, and they use backs and tight ends on the edge, and they're max protecting him, what I would call, and doing some downfield. They have fast guys, so they can run all over the place. And they're protecting him on purpose, in my opinion. I'm sure he knows he's a freshman. The coach knows that he's a freshman, and he's smart. He's going to protect him, and that's what they're doing. And he doesn't want to take off and run much, in my opinion, and they don't try to design runs for him.
statistically, was, didn't look like a great weekend for your defensive line, but it sounds like you were pretty pleased with the way they maybe contained Duggan, even though you didn't.
Statistically.
You didn't have as many sacks, tackles for loss.
Yeah. Again, I go back to when you play a team that spreads out and then they have number one, you have to be aware of where one is all the time. I mean, y'all have watched him. We tried to defend him. He still made a bunch of plays, but you have to be aware of him and you have to be aware of the quarterback run. So that takes away from your pass rush. Can't just have Adam, because then if he slips out and takes off, I mean, y'all have watched him run on TV. I mean, most of the time you end up chasing him, you don't catch him. And so we had to be aware of that. We had to be aware of number one. So they kind of get you spread out. And they have that advantage now with what they're doing. So similar to, the years that we had James Washington, and then we had, Kendall or Justice Hill, whoever. And then you had a backside threat. They had to worry about that guy and over the top, and they had to worry about Marcel Aitman, and then they had to worry about stopping the run game, so they're spread across the field. And that's really what TCU has going now, in my opinion. And 33 is a good player. Was that his number? He's a good runner. I mean, these two guys for Texas, and then 33 is really good, and Kansas State guy's pretty good too. I just haven't seen him yet. He's supposed to be pretty good.
Did you get any more clarification on the way you substitute defensive players late
Haven't.
in the play call?
I don't call Greg on Sunday. Greg's involved with NFL and all that. I'll call him today and try to find out how we're gonna do this. I just want to know how we're gonna do it. So, but when they do that and we go on the field, we should get a chance to come off the field. Period. That's the rule, in my opinion. Now, I need to call and find out. I'm not.
Were they upset with the first time when Brock jogged onto the field at a fairly stark, slow pace? Was that part of their?
Well, I'm not sure, but everybody in the league's doing it. Tech was really good at it against us. I mean, really good at it, right? They were really good. I guess the best way to put it is it's just a part of the game that's going on that needs to be eliminated, but most everybody's using it. So we need to clarify it, and it's funny you guys bring that up because I was thinking about it last night driving home. You almost want a timer to go off. You want another clock, in my opinion. So when the rule says when somebody subs, then the guy in the back, he turns over and does this. And that means you have 3 seconds to sub. If somebody starts on the field, then he holds it until that guy gets on and that guy gets off, and then he puts it down and he walks away. That's the rule. But it's not working for some reason. There's too much of a human involvement and a human error. And I think the officials would agree. Everything that we can do to take the officials out of the game where human error cannot be a factor would be better. That's why eventually we're going to see balls and strikes called in the big leagues without an umpire back there, because that takes the human element out of it. So once he turns and does this, if we have a guy start to jog on, he should be able to walk away and there should be a clock go off, like the 40-second clock. You got 12 seconds to get, or 10 seconds, I don't care, whatever. You got to get that guy off the field, because when that clock goes to 0, the ball can be snapped and it's your fault. And then what that does is that takes away the human element of how fast you sub and how fast you don't sub. Unfortunately, in my opinion, that's what's eventually going to have to happen, because people using it as a weapon, just like the fake injuries on a turbo team, that's been greatly reduced this year, because they've got moral rules put in effect that could affect your team if you don't follow them, and it's been reduced, which is good. So anyway, I think they're going to have to come up with an extra clock, as much as I hate to say it, because how do you really say you're jogging off too slow and you're not? Who's to judge that? Now, for what you said, could be true. I might call him and he might say, hey, your guy's jogging off too slow. So we just said, it's your fault. I'm good, but that doesn't say that in the rule book.
Was your perception that it changed after Coach Dykes blew his top over on the other side?
I didn't never seen blow his top. I didn't know that. I was unaware of that.
Your perception that it changed within the game, how the officials were handling
It changed, obviously, because they did this and we came on the field and then they called threw a flag on us, so it changed. But let me say this, I think this is a good discussion for the future, but that's not why we lost the game. I mean, they made plays and made good calls in the end, we didn't. But we need to get this figured out because that element we need to take out of the game.
Well, and it becomes, however it's settled, it's a big deal in a year. You've been talking about this since August, where you've got teams around the league going faster, right?
No doubt.
Offensively.
No doubt. And so it's showing up more this year. So what happens is, you guys know, I mean, going fast, you're wanting to sub. Well, they sub, then they start looking to send everybody in. And then they do it slow to give themselves a rest. And that's why they're doing it. And it's happening more this year because most everybody in this league is playing fast now.
I don't want to belabor this, but also, it's an advantage. The team that has more depth is more eager to sub. There's some teams that don't sub in that situation because they don't have anybody better to put in the game. It's an advantage, tactical advantage for a team that does.
Yeah, and they're controlling the clock. There's a long story behind it, and it helps you control disguise. So there's a reason why everybody's doing it. So we're going to have to come up with I don't care what we do, it make a difference to me. We just need a standard, and this is the way it is, and we all have to live by it. I'm good with it.
How late in the play clock do you feel comfortable substituting on offense with the rule?
Well, that's why I don't know, because I don't know how long they're going to hold it. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's why we're going to have to come up with some way to do this, because we can sub with about 18 if they give them 3 seconds. And then somebody comes on and somebody goes off, and then it should be like 8-ish, 7-ish, we're fine. But if they wait longer, or if they let them bring a guy and then another guy comes out 3 seconds later, that's a problem. So we just need some sort of consistency. It's nobody's fault, but we need, in my opinion, some consistency, and that way that part's taken out of the game.
You talked a little bit about Texas offense.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about their defense
mean,
and how you feel they're playing.
They're the same every year, right? They're big up front. They don't play with small guys. They don't play with undersized guys. All their backers are thick and they can run. They're in a challenging mode more this year than they were last year. They're playing more man this year than they were last year. They're going to play some mini, going to play some quarters. But they're playing with NFL guys on defense. I mean, it's the same thing they've always played with.
Mike, your game finished almost simultaneous with Alabama, Tennessee. Great finish. The underdog won. Big celebration, all that. Later in the night, Utah knocks off USC. 3 marquee games went down to the wire. Anybody could have won.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great day for college football. You came out on the wrong end of it, but do you see it as a sign of where college football is or is going in terms of anything can happen and
Sure.
maybe the big dogs?
Well,
TCU not necessarily, but anybody can win, and maybe we're getting more parity down the
yeah,
line.
NIL and the portals created that, and I've talked about it in here for a month. I just started watching a couple games, seeing some scores and stuff, and I don't see anybody play many games, but and I said this last week, it's turned into the NFL. 2 weeks ago, the Patriots were 1-3. And the Rams were 2-3 a week ago. They just won the Super Bowl. Patriots have a good coach. How are they 1-3? There's so much parity, and now it's trickled down to this level with free agency, basically, and NIL. And so now it's trickled down to this level. And then what you're seeing is how a couple portal moves, or a couple NIL deals, whatever, can take a team from 3 or 4 losses and make them an 8-win team just like that. And so now you're getting tons of parity. And I didn't see one play of the Tennessee game or Alabama game or whatever. I did see a little bit of the game you're talking about, Utah, because it was late at night. They had a good battle. Kid from Texas played good late in the game. I think he's from Texas, isn't he? Rising? Yeah. So, but what you're saying is right. That's what's happened now.
You haven't jumped into the portal all that much. Do you think you will or need to or are going to?
I just believe in developing the ones in our program, and those discussions could go on forever. We try to recruit the right players that we think that can fit in our culture and do what we do in our schemes and develop them. Like we had, and it works against you. Like we had some guys leave here that, you know, the Mills kid that's playing at Tech, you know, he would be starting for us now. And, you know, he felt like he was going to be a backup, so he left, which is fine. I'm just saying, but he'd be starting for us. You know, obviously Jarek would be starting. McAllister would be starting. Jernigan at Missouri would be starting. So you take a certain number of guys and they vacate and you try to replace them with young kids. So what you're saying is correct in the fact that we have to decide whether we can replace them with young kids and get them developed fast enough, or you start trying to work the same free agency and get guys in and get them developed over a 6-month period. So as of now, we're trying to develop our people. But those discussions go on all the time, as you can imagine. In the staff room, everybody has an answer.
Do you think you can find a medium between that where you're developing the young guys but also bringing in transfers while they're developing?
We've tried to do that because we've used the portal. I mean, we brought in 3 or 4 kids. And so we're trying to do just what you said. But if we think we have young players that are going to develop, we're going to stay with those guys because they understand our culture, different than a new guy coming in that we have to train, which takes a little bit of time.
A week ago, you were talking about maybe this being the best special teams group that you've had, and I know you gave up a couple of returns, but you also got a muff on Saturday that you recovered and set up a score. And then Tanner Brown, he may be over the top at the way he's kicking it right now, right?
Yeah, so we were good Saturday, with the exception of we missed 2 tackles and they got a 30-yard return. So that's going to happen some, and that guy's a good player. I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, our guys make people miss. And then we got one. Tom's been unbelievable for us, but he got 1 punt in the middle of the field. So when you punt in the middle of the field, you're covering 52 yards. We normally punt over on the numbers, and we're covering about 15 yards. And so that's where we weren't as effective as we should have been in those areas. But I still like our special teams, and I like our skill special teams. Those guys are playing very well.
That kick may have been good from 60. I mean, it was 52, but it was a lot.
Yeah, and I told the team last night, we don't do awards or any of that stuff if we don't end the game ahead of the other team. But there was 3 things that happened in that game they need to know. The first 4th down, they tried to run 4th and 2 or whatever when Jabbar and Harper stopped them. They had us at first, and Jabbar comes back and does a couple things and gets him banged around. Then Harper comes and finishes, and we stopped him. When that play started, we had our back against the wall. They had us, let's put it that way. Then in overtime, we had 4th down, and I don't know what it was. When we spread out, we protected it, and had good time. The quarterback progressed. Braden found the open area where they got out of coverage. We sat, we threw it, got to the 1-yard line. We had our backs against the wall there. And then we certainly had our backs against the wall when we had to kick a 52-yarder just to stay alive. And we did those 3 things. Those are things that need to be pointed out for our team. They need to understand that. And those were all on the road. Against, at that time, the crowd was a factor. With 8 minutes and 50 seconds left, the crowd became a factor in the game. Prior to that, the crowd was not a factor at all. And those guys performed at a big time, with the exception of the 4th down, was early in the game.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
Does Saturday at all feel like an elimination game in terms of Big 12 contention?
I mean, I don't think so. I think you got to keep playing. Don't you think there's going to be somebody in there with 2 losses?
Yeah, and I'm not saying you'd be out. Well, whoever loses, Saturday, I think they have 2 losses. And I'm not saying that's an automatic. They're
Yeah.
out.
Oh, you talking about this coming game?
Yeah, you're.
Oh, I don't know.
Not last week, this week.
I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, either way, we got to go play, but I think there are going to be somebody in that game with 2 losses this year.
Yeah.
I mean, and I really haven't paid much attention to who's doing what. Is there anybody that hadn't lost? TCU? And who else?
State has lost.
Yeah, so TCU and K-State are the undefeated teams. So,
Just in terms of like tiebreaker, losing the teams that you're going to be fighting with for the division.
yeah, I mean, could be. They all could be from here on out. But, I don't really have to think about it because it won't do me any good anyway. Doesn't give me an advantage.
Anything else for Coach?
In the last 3 weeks, you guys have kicked 8 field goals inside the 17, and even though Tanner Brown's been perfect so far, is that a concern at all that you're having to settle for so many field goals in the red
Yeah.
zone?
Oh, yeah. I mean, college football is about finishing with touchdowns and not field goals. And our defense did exactly that on Saturday in the first half. Held them to field goals. And we scored touchdowns. And then in the second half, we ended up kicking field goals, and they scored touchdowns. And then overtime ended up being a difference. But you're exactly right. Kick too many field goals, and yeah, it's gonna be tough.
What do you think's been that problem in the red zone that you guys haven't been able to punch it in?
Most of what we have to get accomplished on offense is rushing the ball effectively enough to balance who we are. It makes a difference where we are on the field. If we can rush the ball a little bit better, then we can balance up. We can avoid being one-dimensional. It makes us a better team.
You made reference to Kelvin Banks earlier. How did you guys get in on him as early as you did, and was there a time when you kind of felt like he was going to?
I came up here when he's about a freshman or something, a sophomore, or he was young. I mean, in fact, I almost remember him being up here and he was like 14 years old. He was like 6'6", 320, and he was like 14. And coming to my office with his family, his mom and dad, and then he came back again, and then they committed. They loved it here, and so on and so forth, and then Texas got him from us at the end. That's the best I remember. All righty, thank you.